The Ukrainian Greek Catholic Church, Ukrains'ka Hreko-Katolyts'ka Tserkva, is a Byzantine Rite Eastern Catholic Church in full communion with the Holy See. It is the second largest particular church in the Catholic Church. It traces its origin to the Ruthenian Uniate Church that existed before the partition of Poland. The primate of the church holds the office of Archbishop-Major of Kyiv-Halych and all Ruthenia, though the hierarchs and faithful of the church have acclaimed the primate Patriarch, and have requested papal recognition of, and elevation to, this title. The church is one of the successor churches to the acceptance of Christianity by Grand Prince Vladimir the Great of Kiev, in 988. The church has followed the spread of the Ukrainian diaspora and now has some 40 hierarchs in over a dozen countries on 4 continents, including 3 other metropolitan bishops in Poland, the United States, and Canada. The head of the church is Major Archbishop Sviatoslav Shevchuk, since March 2011. Within Ukraine itself, the UGCC is a minority of the religious population, being a distant second to the majority Eastern Orthodox faith. The Ukrainian Greek Catholic Church is the second largest religious organization in Ukraine in terms of number of communities. In terms of number of members, the Ukrainian Greek Catholic Church ranks third in allegiance among the population of Ukraine after the Ukrainian Orthodox Church and the Ukrainian Orthodox Church Kyiv Patriarchate. Currently, the Ukrainian Greek Catholic Church predominates in 3 western oblasts of Ukraine, including about half the population of Lviv, but constitutes a small minority elsewhere in the country. History. Ecumenical Patriarch of Constantinople, Metropolis of all Ruthenia. The Ruthenian Uniate Church was created with the Union of Brest in 1595–1596, yet its roots go back to the very beginning of Christianity in the medieval Slavic state of Ruthenia. Byzantine missionaries exercised decisive influence in the area. The 9th-century mission of Saints Cyril and Methodius in Great Moravia had particular importance, as the work allowed the spread of worship in the Old Church Slavonic language. The Byzantine Greek influence continued, particularly with the official adoption of Byzantine rites by Prince Vladimir I of Kiev in 988, when there was established the Ecumenical Patriarch of Constantinople, Metropolis of Kiev and all Ruthenia. Later, at the time of the Great Schism, the Ruthenian Church took sides and remained Orthodox. Following the Mongol devastating invasion of Ruthenia and sack of Kiev in 1240, Metropolitan Maximus of Kiev moved to the town of Vladimir on Klyazma in 1299. In 1303, on petition of Ruthenia kings from the Kingdom of Russia, Patriarch Athanasius I of Constantinople created a separate metropolis of Halych that included western parishes of the original metropolis of Kiev, and all Ruthenia. The new metropolis did not last for long, and its new metropolitan Peter of Moscow was consecrated as the Metropolitan of Kiev and all Ruthenia, instead of Metropolitan of Halych. Just before his death, Peter moved his episcopal see from Vladimir to Moscow. During his reign there was established Metropolitanate of Lithuania in the Grand Duchy of Lithuania, while after his death Metropolis of Halych was re-established as well. In 1445 the Metropolitan Isidore, with his see in Moscow, joined the Council of Florence and became a papal legate of all Ruthenia and Lithuania. After Isidore suffered prosecutions by local bishops and royalty of the Grand Duchy of Moscow, he was banned away from Muscovy, while the Muscovite princes appointed own Metropolitan Jonah of Moscow without consent of the Ecumenical Patriarch of Constantinople. Because of that, Patriarch Gregory III of Constantinople reorganized the Ruthenian Church in the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth, and its new primates were titled as Metropolitans of Kyiv-Halych and all Ruthenia. He appointed Gregory II Bulgarian as the new Uniate Primate, who in 1470 rejoined the Ecumenical Patriarch of Constantinople under Dionysius I of Constantinople. Union of Brest. This situation continued for some time, and in the intervening years what is now western and central Ukraine came under the rule of the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth. The Polish King Sigismund III Vasa was heavily influenced by the ideals of the Counter-Reformation and wanted to increase the Catholic presence in Ukraine. Meanwhile, the clergy of the Ruthenian lands were ruled from distant Constantinople, and much of the population was loyal to Russian Orthodoxy rather than to the Polish Catholic monarch. Persecution of the Orthodox population grew, and under pressure of Polish authorities, the clergy of the Ruthenian Church agreed by the Union of Brest in 1595 to break from the Patriarchate of Constantinople and unite with the Catholic Church under the authority of the ruler of the Commonwealth, Sigismund III Vasa. In exchange for ending the persecution, the union was not accepted by all the members of the Greek Church in these lands, and marked the creation of separate Ukrainian Catholic and Ukrainian Orthodox churches in Ukraine and Belarus. Due to violence, the Metropolitan of the Kievan Greek Catholic Church left Kiev early in the 17th century and settled in Novorossiysk and Vilnius in Lithuania. After the union, the final step of the full particularity of the Ruthenian Uniate Church was then effected by the development of the Middle Ruthenian language into separate Russian, Ukrainian and Belarusian languages around 1600 to 1800. With Orthodoxy being largely suppressed during the 2 centuries of Polish rule, the Greek Catholic influence on the Ukrainian population was so great that in several oblasts hardly anyone remained Orthodox. After the partition of Poland, the formerly Greek Catholic territory was mostly divided between Russia and Austria. The portion which came under Russian rule included Rite Bank, Ukraine and modern Belarus, while dioceses of Lviv, Kyiv, and Peremyshal came under Austrian rule. In the easternmost areas of Podolia, the population mainly reverted to Orthodoxy. Initially, the Russian authorities were extremely tolerant of the Greek Catholic Church and allowed it to function without restraint. However, the clergy soon split into pro-Catholic and pro-Russian, with the former tending to convert to Latin Rite Catholicism, whilst the latter group, led by Bishop Joseph Semashko and firmly rejected by the ruling Greek Catholic Synod, remained largely controlled by the pro-Polish clergy, with the Russian authorities largely refusing to interfere. The situation changed abruptly following Russia's successful suppression of the 1831 Polish uprising, aimed at overthrowing Russian control of the Polish territories. As the uprising was actively supported by the Greek Catholic Church, a crackdown on the Church occurred immediately. The pro-Latin members of the Synod were removed, and the Church began to disintegrate, with its parishes in Volhynia reverting to Orthodoxy, including the 1833 transfer of the famous Kyiv-Halych. In 1839, the Synod of Polotsk, under the leadership of Bishop Semashko, dissolved the Greek Catholic Church in the Russian Empire, and all its property was transferred to the Orthodox State Church. The 1913 Catholic Encyclopedia says that in what was then known as Little Russia, the pressure of the Russian government utterly wiped out Greek Catholicism, and some 7 million of the Uniates that were compelled, partly by force and partly by deception, to become part of the Greek Orthodox Church. The dissolution of the Greek Catholic Church in Russia was completed in 1875 with the abolition of the Eparchy of Qom. 19th century, West Ukrainian period. Elimination of Ruthenian Catholicism within the Russian Empire began early in the 19th century. In 1803 the Pope of Rome granted the transfer of the quasi-patriarchal powers of the major Archiepiscopate of Kyiv-Halych and all Rus to the Metropolitan of Lviv in the Austro-Hungarian Empire. Suffragans included Ivano-Frankivsk and Przemysl. By the end of the century, those remaining faithful to this church began emigrating to the U.S., Canada, and Brazil. The territory received by Austria-Hungary in the partition of Poland included Halychina. Here the Greek Catholic Ruthenian peasantry had been largely under Polish Roman Catholic domination. The Austrians granted equal freedom of worship to the Greek Catholic Church and removed Polish influence. They also mandated that Uniate seminarians receive a formal higher education, and organized institutions in Vienna and Lviv that would serve this function. This led to the appearance, for the first time, of a large educated class within the Ukrainian population in Halychina. It also engendered a fierce sense of loyalty to the Habsburg dynasty. When Polish rebels briefly took control of Lviv in 1809, they demanded that the head of the Ukrainian Greek Catholic Church, Anton Anhilovich, substitute Napoleon's name in the Divine Liturgy for that of Austrian Emperor Francis II. Anhilovich refused, and was imprisoned. When the Austrians retook control over Lviv, Anhilovich was awarded the Cross of Leopold by the Emperor. As a result of the reforms, over the next century the Greek Catholic Church in Austrian Halychina ceased being a puppet of foreign interests and became the primary cultural force within the Ukrainian community. Most independent native Ukrainian cultural and political trends emerged from within the ranks of the Greek Catholic Church clergy. The participation of Greek Catholic priests of the children in Western Ukrainian cultural and political life was so great that Western Ukrainians were accused of wanting to create a theocracy in Western Ukraine by the Polish rivals. Among the political trends that emerged, the Christian social movement was particularly linked to the Ukrainian Catholic Church. Many people saw the Austrians as having saved the Ukrainians and the Church from the Poles, though it was the Poles who set into motion the Greek Catholic cast of their church. 20th century persecution and internationalization. After World War I, Ukrainian Greek Catholics found themselves under the governance of the nations of Poland, Hungary, Romania and Czechoslovakia. Under the previous century of Austrian rule, the Ukrainian Greek Catholic Church attained such a strong Ukrainian national character that in interwar Poland, the Greek Catholics of Galicia were seen by the nationalist Polish and Catholic state as even less patriotic than the Orthodox Volhynians. Extending its Polonization policies to its eastern territories, the Polish authorities sought to weaken the UGCC. In 1924, following a visit with Ukrainian Catholic believers in North America and Western Europe, the head of the UGCC was initially denied re-entry to LWOW, only being allowed back after a considerable delay. Polish Roman Catholic priests, led by the Latin bishops, began missionary work among Greek Catholics, and administrative restrictions were placed on the Ukrainian Greek Catholic Church. After World War II, Ukrainian Catholics came under the rule of Communist Poland and the Hungarian hegemony of the Soviet Union. With only a few clergy invited to attend, a synod was convened in Lviv, which revoked the Union of Brest. Officially all of the church property was transferred to the Russian Orthodox Church under the Moscow Patriarchate. Most of the Ukrainian Greek Catholic clergy went underground. This catacomb church was strongly supported by its diaspora in the Western Hemisphere. Emigration to the US and Canada, which had begun in the 1870s, increased after World War II. In the winter of 1944–45, Ukrainian Greek Catholic clergy were summoned to re-education sessions conducted by the NKVD. Near the end of the war in Europe, the state media began an anti-Ukrainian Catholic campaign. The creation of the community in 1596 was discredited in publications, which went to great pains to try to prove the Church was conducting activities directed against Ukrainians in the first half of the 20th century. In 1945, Soviet authorities arrested, deported, and sentenced to forced labor camps in Siberia and elsewhere the Church's Metropolitan Yosef Slipy and 9 other Greek Catholic bishops, as well as hundreds of clergy and leading lay activists. In Lviv alone, 800 priests were imprisoned. All the above-mentioned bishops and significant numbers of clergymen died in prisons, concentration camps, internal exile, or soon after the release during the post-Stalin thaw. The exception was Metropolitan Yosef Slipy, who, after 18 years of imprisonment and persecution, was released thanks to the intervention of Pope John XXIII. Slipy took refuge in Rome, where he received the title of Major Archbishop of Lviv, and became a cardinal in 1965. The clergy who joined the Russian Orthodox Church were spared the large-scale persecution of religion that occurred elsewhere in the country. In the city of Lviv, only one church was closed. Moreover, the western dioceses of Lviv, Ternopil and Ivano-Frankivsk were the largest in the USSR and contained the majority of the Russian Orthodox churches. Cloisters. Orthodox canon law was also relaxed on the clergy, allowing them to shave beards and conduct liturgy in Ukrainian as opposed to Church Slavonic. The Ukrainian Catholics continued to exist underground for decades and were the subject of vigorous attacks in the state media. The clergy gave up public exercise of the clerical duties, but secretly provided services for many lay people. Many priests took up civilian professions and celebrated the sacraments in private. The identities of former priests could have been known to the Soviet police, who regularly watched them, interrogated them and put fines on them, but stopped short of arrest unless their activities went beyond a small circle of people. New secretly ordained priests were often treated more harshly. The Church even grew during this time, and this was acknowledged by Soviet sources. The first secretary of the Lviv Komsomol, Oleksiy Babatychuk, claimed, in this oblast, particularly in the rural areas, a large number of the population adheres to religious practices, among them a large proportion of youth. In the last few years, the activity of the Uniates has grown, that of representatives of the Uniates as well as former Uniate priests. There are even reverberations to renew the overt activity of this church. After Stalin died, Ukrainian Catholics hoped this would lead to better conditions for themselves, but such hopes were dashed in the late 1950s when the authorities arrested even more priests and unleashed a new wave of anti-Catholic propaganda. Secret ordinations occurred in exile. secret theological seminaries in Ternopil and Kolomyia were reported in the Soviet press in the 1960s when their organizers were arrested. In 1974, a clandestine convent was uncovered in Lviv. During the Soviet era, the Ukrainian Greek Catholic Church did flourish throughout the Ukrainian diaspora. Cardinal Yosef Slipy was jailed as a dissident but named Inspector Cardinal in 1949. He was freed in 1963 and was the subject of an extensive campaign to have him named as a Patriarch, which met with strong support as well as controversy. Pope Paul VI demurred, but compromised with the creation of a new title of Major Archbishop, with a jurisdiction roughly equivalent to that of a Patriarch in an Eastern Church. This title has since passed to Miroslav Ivan Lubachevsky in 1984 and thereafter to Lubomir Hazar in 2000 and Sviatoslav Shevchuk in 2011. This title has also been granted to the heads of 3 other Eastern Catholic churches. In 1968, when the Ukrainian Catholic Church was legalized in Czechoslovakia, a large-scale campaign was launched to harass recalcitrant clergy who remain illegal. These clergy were subject to interrogations, fines and beatings. In January 1969, the KGB arrested an underground Catholic bishop named Vasil Velichkovsky and 2 Catholic priests, and sentenced them to 3 years of imprisonment for breaking anti-religious legislation. Activities that could lead to arrest included holding religious services, educating children as Catholics, performing baptisms, conducting weddings or funerals, hearing confessions or giving the last rites, copying religious materials, possessing prayer books, possessing icons, possessing church calendars, possessing religious books or other sacred objects. Conferences were held to discuss how to perfect the methodology in combating Ukrainian Catholicism in the West Ukraine. At times, the Ukrainian Catholics attempted to employ legal channels to have the community recognized by the state. In 1956-1957 there were petitions to the proper authorities to request for churches to be open. More petitions were sent in the 60s and 70s, all of which were refused. In 1976, a priest named Volodymyr Prokypa was arrested for presenting such a petition to Moscow. The response to these petitions by the state had been to sharpen attacks against the community. In 1984, a samizdat chronicle of the Catholic Church began to be published by Ukrainian Catholics. The founder of the group behind this publication, Yosef Tyalia, was arrested in 1985 and sentenced to 7 years imprisonment and 5 years of exile. His successor, Vasily Kobrin, was arrested and sentenced to 3 years of exile. The Solidarity movement in Poland and Pope John Paul II supported the Ukrainian Catholics. The state media attacked John Paul II. The anti-religious journal Untitled published in Kiev wrote, "Proof that the Church is persistently striving to strengthen its political influence in socialist countries is witnessed by the fact that Pope John Paul II gives his support to the émigré hierarchy of the so-called Ukrainian Catholic Church." The current tactic of Pope John Paul II and the Roman Curia lies in the attempts to strengthen the position of the Church in all socialist countries, as they have done in Poland, where the Vatican tried to raise the status of the Catholic Church to a state within a state. In the last few years, the Vatican has paid particular attention to the question of Catholicism of the Slavonic nations. This is poignantly underscored by the the Pope when he states that he is not only a Pope of Polish origin, but the first Slavic Pope, and he will pay particular attention to the Christianization of all Slavic nations. By the late 1980s there was a shift in the Soviet government's attitude towards religion. At the height of Mikhail Gorbachev's liberalization reforms, the Ukrainian Greek Catholic Church was allowed again to function officially in December 1989. But then it found itself largely in disarray, with nearly all of its pre-1946 parishes and property lost to the Orthodox faith. The Church, actively supported by nationalist organizations such as Rite and later the UNSO, took an uncompromising stance towards the return of its lost property and parishes. According to a Greek Catholic priest, even if the whole village is now Orthodox and one person is Greek Catholic, the Church belongs to that Catholic because the Church was built by his grandparents and great-grandparents. The weakened Soviet authorities were unable to pacify the situation, and most of the parishes in Halibutt came under the control of the Greek Catholics during the events of a large-scale interconfessional rivalry that was often accompanied by violent clashes of the faithful provoked by the religious and political leadership. These tensions led to a rupture of relations between the Moscow Patriarchate and the Vatican. Modern times. Currently the Church has between 3 and 5 million supporters in Ukraine. Numerous surveys conducted since the late 1990s consistently show that between 6% and 8% of Ukraine's total population, or 9.4% to 12.6% of the country's religious believers, identify themselves as belonging to this church. Worldwide, the faithful now number some 6 to 10 million, forming the largest particular Catholic church after the majority Latin Rite Church. The demographics of Ukraine show that the Greek Catholic Church is increasing at the expense of the majority Orthodox Church, due to higher birth rates and lower death rates among its members. According to a 2015 survey, followers of the Ukrainian Greek Catholic Church make up 8.1% of the total population and form the majority in 3 oblasts. Lviv Oblast, 59% of the population. Ivano-Frankivsk Oblast, 57%. Ternopil Oblast, 52%. Today, most Ukrainian Catholic churches have moved away from Church Slavonic and use Ukrainian. Many churches also offer liturgies in the official language of the country the church is in, for example, German in Germany or English in Canada. However, some parishes continue to celebrate the liturgy in Slavonic even today, and services in a mix of languages are not unusual. In the early first decade of the 21st century, the major see of the Ukrainian Catholic Church was transferred to the Ukrainian capital of Kyiv. The enthronement of the new head of the Church, Major Archbishop Sviatoslav Shevchuk, took place there on the 27th of March 2011 at the cathedral under construction on the left bank. On the 18th of August 2013, the Patriarchal Cathedral of the Resurrection of Christ was dedicated and solemnly opened. Latinization and protest. The Ukrainian Greek Catholic Church previously embarked on a campaign of delatinization reforms. These include the removal of the Stations of the Cross, the Rosary and the Monstrance from the liturgy and parishes. In 2001, a priest, Vasil Kovpak, and a small group of followers opposed to certain policies and ecumenism of the UGCC hierarchy, organized themselves as the Priestly Society of St. Josaphat. The PSSJ possesses close ties with the Latin Rite traditionalist Catholic Society of St. Pius X, which rejects and condemns certain actions and policies of both Hussar and the Pope. On November 21, 2007, the Congregation for the Doctrine of the Faith excommunicated Kovpak. Critics claimed that the SSJK's liturgical practice favors severely abbreviated services and imported Roman Catholic devotions over the traditional and authentic practices of the Ukrainian Greek Catholic Church. Proponents counter that these symbols and rituals, influenced long ago by the Polish Roman Catholic neighbors, have been practiced by Ukrainian Greek Catholics for centuries. To deny them today is to deprive the people of a part of sacred heritage which they have learned to regard as their own. In 2008, a group of Basilian priests at the Pidieti monastery declared that 4 of them had been consecrated bishops without permission of the Pope or the Major Archbishop. The Pidieti fathers had opposed the Latinization, liberal theology, and the ecumenical approach of the hierarchy. Excommunicated in 2008, in 2009 they constituted themselves as the Ukrainian Orthodox Greek Catholic Church.